Southeast Asia has an enormous amount of opportunities for many companies that want to come and explore this market.
Many companies that will approach this trade show and they will only rely on the fact that the trade show will do all the work for them.
They have this approach, let's go by try by error. For a market, an example like a Vietnamese market, this approach will not succeed. If there are no actual sales or the targets are not met, you're perhaps not dealing with the right partner.
Hello everyone, welcome to this new video. In today's video, we're gonna discuss about how company can grow internationally, so get some new market share, specifically in Asia. Many companies, they can be large SME or MNC, they were looking at USA, they were looking at Europe, our market to gain more exposure, gain more traction. But many of them have been actually moving to Asia a decade ago, with obviously China as the main market. Japan, South Korea, there is now more and more dynamism into emerging markets of Southeast Asia. And I'm happy to have today Gaby to join this conversation. Gaby has 20+ year experience in all Asia. You've been living in Vietnam, Cambodia, you've been doing business in Singapore, Japan. I hope through this video we can share about Asia and specifically Southeast Asia as a place to develop your sales, develop your numbers if you are a European or a US company importing goods and distributing goods here in the region. Gaby, welcome here. Can you give us a 1-minute introduction about yourself?
First of all, thank you very much, Guillaume, to invite me to your podcast. I have from a few other contacts, there is a place to be these days. So thank you. And of course, I'm very happy to share with everybody in the audience also my experience here in the Southeast Asia on how to support companies that are thinking to enter this beautiful, challenging, and expanding market.
Thank you, Gaby. One question first from you. We are looking at Southeast Asia as a whole. Do you think all the markets should be approached the same? Or do you think there could be nuances and then main differences between, I would list them, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and maybe Cambodia for the next upcoming years?
Well, Guillaume, I would say that Southeast Asia as a region is quite unified. But when you look into the details, each particular country has their own set of rules and way they operate. Mm-hmm. And if I can add something, for some countries, there is also differences within the system. So let's say a country like Indonesia, which is many different islands, and in different islands, let's say, if you're talking about Sulawesi, if you're talking about Lombok, if you're talking about Java, if you're talking about Sumatra, you will find different realities at a local level for the government and also for the business mentality and infrastructure. Mm-hmm. This also happens in a country like Vietnam. This also happens to a certain extent to a country like Thailand, for example, you know. So we should not generalize too much when we talk about Southeast Asia. So we should take in consideration and analyze country by country. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are some relevant synergies that you can apply to one country to another, especially if they are near the border areas. Sometimes if you are in, let's say, an example, North Vietnam, it operates very well with some operation that you might have in South China, because the distances are very relative, the infrastructure and the port connections and the train connections are good and improving. So it's easy to do business, focusing on the same streamline, compared if you deciding to do perhaps some integrate part of your businesses or market strategies between the one country and another country which they don't have the borders.
We've been together actually in a couple of trade shows here in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and we have discussed with dozens and dozens of exhibitors to get a feeling, how is the market, how do they see the growth in the region, and I think what they have shared could basically be the same in all the different markets. And I would like you to share about this specifically. When we were asking exhibitors, how is the sales strategy? Are you happy with your distributor? Are the expectations that you get from this trade show as high as what you were aiming for? And sometimes the feedback that we get were a bit up and down. Can you share about the discussion we have had?
Yes, it's been very eye-opening experience to visit all these companies, different trade shows for different markets, different type of industries. Remember, we went for the textile, we went for the metal exhibition, the very good exhibition for the source in Vietnam also. And discussing with companies, okay, mainly the ones from Europe and North America, I have to say, when I could read between the lines, the expectations were not actually met with the results that they hoped for. It's relatively easy to find a local partner, or some of them they should have like a distributor working for there, some of them that an agent. So it's very easy to find these companies that they are willing to have you on their books, have your company product in their books, because perhaps they have already 10, 20, 30, or 100 possible suppliers for some particular goods, and they had another one. Then the reality is this actually gonna then transform into actual sales? Because at the end of the day, companies, they come here to explore the Southeast Asian market to have some sales. So it's good to be on somebody's books. They represent your interest, they represent your product, but the reality is that if there are no actual sales or the targets are not met, you're perhaps not dealing with the right partner.
That's exactly what I was thinking as well in terms of the story we have collected from those exhibitors. And mostly the main pain points or the main pitfalls that they fall into is that they find those agents, they find those distributors just randomly at the trade show. So they had a few people coming to the trade show, maybe show a certain interest to the product, and they finally signed, and some of them actually had signed an exclusive distribution partnership with them. And after, they were stuck with this partner, with this distributor, with this agent, and they were sharing about their frustration because they were seeing the competition getting good traction, good sales, opening new markets, while themselves they were stuck. And we were brainstorming about that, about this sales channels review that sometimes companies should proactively be doing internally to also assess the capabilities and then how their outsourced team or their distribution team sometimes performs, because such companies should have their similar KPIs to their own internal resources, but also to distributors, partners, and people that are working overseas. And we had also very lately a discussion with a European group. They are very keen, and they have this way of always opening new market through trade show. And I could also share with the story of a prospect that we engaged with that shared with us that doing trade show and participating to trade show were 90% of their outbound strategy. So very much taking the sales team to a new market, aiming for 3 to 4 exhibitions per year, sending the team over there to just try. Is this market relevant for me? Yes, no, and after moving to another market. What are your perspectives about that, about how companies approach differently their sales growth, and what are the trade-offs from some strategies compared to others?
I see that quite a few companies, when they come to try to enter the Asian market, they have this approach or attitude where let's go by try by error. We go there and we see what happens. This, of course, for some companies, as the strategy has worked in some markets, but not necessarily work in every single market. For a market, an example like a Vietnamese market, this approach will not succeed. I know because I saw this happening many, many times with companies that they ask the support, we may be able to change from one agent, one distributor, one wholesaler to a new one. But after they sign the contracts, these things, sometimes you have to buy your time. If you have 1 year or 2 years contract, if you have not happy with your partner, you suddenly sign any type of long-term contracts with them, you're stuck with them. So I think rule number 1 would be you need to do your homework before you come into the market. You need to have a clear understanding how the market is, who are the key players, who is already in this market, who are your international competitors, who are your local competitors. And I understand this, if your headquarters is in Berlin and you're a traditional German company, you don't have the knowledge or the resources to do this. But you should have the approach to have somebody to help you to do this, because there are professionals in Vietnam and many other countries, Southeast Asia, that they are experts in how the local market operates. And I would like to restate again that you need to know how the local market operates. If you don't have this knowledge, you will not be able to enter it. It might have worked in some countries, but it definitely won't work for the Vietnamese market. Because like I mentioned quite a few times with many other business people, it's all about relations. If you have the relations with the companies, they will push your products. If you're in relation with some companies, they will make the changing to adapt their selling strategy to your selling strategies. They will adapt their KPIs to your KPIs in order to match and to make sure that this symbiosis between your company in the European reality, the US, North American reality, matches the modus to work of the Vietnamese partner.
So that's very important what you have shared, Gaby, that even though you will attend to trade show, it's good to do groundwork, to preliminary assess if a market is viable for your own branding, to look into mapping potential competitors, and then to already maybe contact in advance potential distributors that could be a good fit for you. And then when you are coming on the ground, then it's a matter of adjusting, meeting multiple distributors, multiple partners, and seeing which one you have the best fit and which one you are already seeing a win-win type of collaboration. And that's something we can obviously support within our company. But beyond that, I think sometimes this trial and error, as you has just described, is just part of how companies approach this expansion. And some companies are willing to invest 6 months, 1 year into just doing trial and error one time. We can also facilitate that actually when some companies approach us and they want to get to know more about the Vietnamese market or the Southeast Asian market more in general. We can often pre-arrange a qualified week of B2B meetings. So usually we assess the current landscape, we identify who could be the stakeholders to speak to, identify potential distributors, and then we bring the client to the office of the partners, the distributors, the wholesalers, and we facilitate these discussions. Because I think what you have also emphasized is sometimes this communication gap, expectation gap, or cultural gap are also sometimes where there is a friction. And by having a local team that can facilitate those initial discussions, that's when you can also put the strong foundations of a win-win partnership, I would say.
You're correct. The groundwork needs to be done before you come into Vietnam. There's no point for the companies to come in here. Just hope we go to a trade show and we'll find an agent, we find the distributors, because you can find millions of them. The reality is, are they going to be good for you? So just to do this little step extra to do the groundwork before you come, it will make a whole lot of difference. You will be able to come in here and have the right partners, like you say earlier on, the right partner to work on the north of Vietnam, the right partner to work in the south of Vietnam, because not necessarily just one partner will be able to look after your best interest throughout the north or to the south. Depends on the strength and the local knowledge of the local market, because Vietnam is kind of fragmented area, the 2 or 3 different areas like we mentioned earlier on.
So what you have just shared, Gaby, I think is very important, because many companies, they will approach this trade show and they will only rely on the fact that the trade show will do all the work for them. They will spread the word, they will bring in people from neighboring countries interested in the same industry. That's true. Many trade shows has been doing the same job for 10 years, 20 years, some of them even more. So of course they are known for certain industry, and when they will have this type of event, it's going to bring in a lot of people. But it's also true that some companies, their own capabilities to try to really leverage as much as possible the effect of a trade show. And I would like you to share more about that, about how FVS team can actually plug into the current ecosystem and the current trade show happening to bring in more value to the company. And what is it also in terms of the cost? Because usually when you send a team, a sales team overseas, you will send at least 2 people, sometimes 3 people. So I would say 1,500 to 2,000 euro flight tickets. You add up the hotel, you add up 1 or 2 extra days for your own staff, then it's already $2,000 US. How could a company locally grounded bring more value than sending an extra staff?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a very good point, Kion, because we already deal with quite a few companies here at FSOs. We will support them to how to best approach some trade shows, not just in Vietnam, but here in the whole region. And I have to start with the point that you are not able, being abroad, to do all the necessary due diligence to screen the companies that you might want to talk to. So this is very important because it's something that happens before you actually come in here. Of course, the trade show will put your name, advertise for people that want to come and talk to your booth, they see that you are a little bit of marketing like they do for everybody else. But if you want to be 5 steps ahead of your competitors, you get the support of somebody, local companies here, they understand the market on how to prepare everything for you before you arrive here. Not necessarily just with the people going to be at the trade show, but with other key stakeholders. They already exist in the country. They are not interested to go to this trade show because they might have already their own suppliers with some products. But the local company will be able to tease them, to make them understand there's a point for somebody to come and talk to you. So this would be extra events that will happen just before or after the trade show. The team of FBSOs can go with you and guide you to go and visit the local offices of actually these potential clients, potential partners, potential distributors, potential wholesaler that you will not be able to get just to the trade show. Of course, the trade show, to partner with a company like FBSOs, you will have lots of other benefits because, like I mentioned earlier on, you don't need to send when I go to the many trade shows, usually I see like some companies they send 2, 3, sometimes even 4 people from their own countries. Let's say I'm an example in Italy, so I go to see some Italian companies that come to visit some trade fairs here in the region, and sometimes they talk like 2 or 3 people from the same company. So these are my mind is like a huge disruption for your operations because you have all your sales team, international sales team, in a different time zone. If you get the support and the help of a local company, they understand the market, you will just get away with sending one person from your team, perhaps, a kind of senior person, and liaising with the FBSO's local team in here to support you at the fair, to really study before your product and be able to explain and explore the sales channels that the trade fair itself gives you the opportunity to have, meeting B2B clients or just somebody popping on your booth and asking about what kind of product you have. And also, entering a partnership for these trade fairs with a company like FBSOs, another positive aspect is that all the marketing materials can be actually produced here in the country. You don't need to ship, thousands and thousands of leaflets and information and brochures. Sometimes you might have a limited space or limited weight or some the regulation to import these samples or marketing materials might vary from country to country. So it's not feasible for you to import about a certain amount. Partnering with a company like FBSOs, this is possible because everything will be done locally. So the local company will understand who you are, what you do, and will be able to support you at the booth in the best way, of course, dealing with the local language, with the local buyers, the local partners, which is always an inevitable, important part of the transactions that usually happen here in Southeast Asia. If you speak the local language, you will be able to open many, many more doors. From my 22 years here in Asia, I remember back on the base, there are many companies, foreign companies, that let's say there's sales representative office based in Hong Kong, of course. Those days are gone. Not many companies are based in Hong Kong as a headquarters anymore, but they have Singapore, of course, Bangkok. They always been a place quite popular with many companies to have set up their offices there, and Kuala Lumpur also, to a certain extent. When you're trying to run your regional sales in Southeast Asia, just with the sales team in one country, it's not effective as it should be on paper. Because yes, it's only 1 hour away by flight. Yes, there might be similar food on the table, but actually the working culture is completely different, the language is completely different, and there might be some national issues from time to time that if you are, let's say, a Thai person trying to sell the product for your European or North American partners in a country, let's say recently we had issues in Cambodia, where Thailand and Cambodia relationship were not so good. So therefore, you lost all your possible sales in the country because you have somebody that is from a neighboring country, but the relationship are minority. I think we might have something similar in Europe, with an Italian company trying to sell their product in France, unless you're a French sales agent trying to sell your products, is very challenging for an Italian person to sell. If I'm not wrong, this is something. If just to give you an idea, what would be the similar challenges in Europe. Also, the countries are very close. They're part of a similar business organization, Southeast Asia, but the local knowledge is invaluable. Nobody has the local knowledge of South Vietnam unless a company is based in South Vietnam. Nobody has the local knowledge of North Thailand unless the expert and the base is in Chiang Mai. They might be great in Bangkok, and then they cover South Bangkok. You have all the little agents in there. They will work very well for you. But as soon as you take them out from the real comfort zone, and the comfort zone, as I said many times in Southeast Asia, is not country by country. It's an area by area.
So it's great, Gaby. I think Vietnamese people, they like to buy from a Vietnamese company. Thai people, they will like to buy from a Thai company. It's going to be the same in the different markets. So getting a team locally grounded can help you to leverage a lot of your sales activity in a certain market. And Asia, don't look at only at one country. This is a fragmented ecosystem. So better you are locally present, or you have a partner who is locally present, so you can really efficiently sell your products and services. So as a wrap up, I think this video gives to our audience a pretty good understanding about APAC, Southeast Asia, and how those markets are present. Obviously, there are opportunities, but they should be taken as one country by one country. Even though there are similarities from the West, there are still some slight nuances, and they should be approached one by one. Gaby, one last word for our audience.
Southeast Asia has an enormous amount of opportunities for many companies that want to come and explore this market, because population-wise, we're talking about billions, and the local economies now are not so anymore like young emerging markets. These are becoming mature emerging markets with a high consumption power. And of course, like I said earlier on, in order for you to gain, to benefit from this huge potential, you need to do your homework and make sure that you partner with the right company to make sure you don't waste any time or any of your resources in trying to do it by trial and error experience.
Thank you, Gaby. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Leon. It's always a pleasure to see you.
And I see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.